Oh, hello everybody, good evening. I'm Cosmic Claire, and welcome to another one of my nightly, and I hope there will be, video blogs. Well, now the big event we're all building up to at the moment, well, if you know about it, is the end of the Mayan long count on Friday, which is the end of a 5,125 year calendric cycle based on the complex mathematical systems of the Maya, which are more accurate than the current Gregorian system. But it's also the end of a precessional cycle, as the winter solstice sun is in direct alignment with the centre of the galaxy. Now, this is actually something that's been going on for several years now, and it will continue for another 3 or 4 years, I understand. But so it takes place over about 18 or 25 years or something, because it's such a slow progression across the sky. You know, it can be considered to be within conjunction for that 2-decade period or so. However, the Mayans, who were, you know, the most advanced calendrical culture that has ever been known, for some reason chose this particular year to end their calendar, which is interesting. We could speculate about why that might be, but just wanted to kind of mostly just talk about how when you're coming to the end of one cycle, you kind of want to look back, a bit like when you come to the end of a year on New Year's Eve, you kind of look back and think, oh, what's happened this year and what might happen next year? Well, we're going to have plenty of speculation about what's going to come in the next calendric cycle, but one thing that I'm interested in, and which is, I think, for me and a lot of other people, played a big part in the kind of growing awareness of a bigger picture of the world over the last 20 years or so. Interestingly, during that time when we've been transiting the winter solstice, sun's been transiting the galactic core, is the growing awareness of the ancient lost civilizations, possibly, which has been given to us all by the investigative powers and determination of people such as John Anthony West, Robert Boban, of course, the great Graham Hancock, Robert Shark, all that crew, Andrew Collins, not to be ignored. He's done a bit of work on his own, very interesting, and lots of other people. And what I find very interesting about this is that we found so much stuff out now about the culture that preceded our present one, which began with Mesopotamia. I mean, the Mesopotamian culture may have, it probably did begin earlier than 5,000 years ago, but there was clearly something, stuff that went on a lot earlier than even that, and I'm thinking particularly of the evidence that's been uncovered over the last 10 or 15 years at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is a series of giant stone circles and ritual monolith type structures, kind of similar to Stonehenge, but actually much larger in extent. There's thought to be ground penetrating radars. I think it's 7 or 9 other circles that, other than the 1 or 2 which have been excavated. So that's 9,500 BC approximately. Certainly in excess of 9,000 BC, 11,000 plus years old, which takes us back into the turbulent period at the end of the Ice Age, when conventional archaeologists and historians would have us believe that we were all just hunter-gatherer nomads, which is a viable and respectable way of life in its own way. But it's unlikely that hunter-gatherer nomads in small clans roaming the wilds would be building giant stone structures with highly sophisticated carvings on them. Just go and Google up Göbekli Tepe. It's Gobekli, and it's absolutely fascinating to think that there was this advanced culture there in Turkey 11,500 years ago, and this would probably also likely to be contemporaneous with buildings from Egypt, such as the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple. Given the dating of the Sphinx by Robert Schoch and others who have corroborated his data and his hypothesis that the Sphinx was carved out, at least, Robert Schoch is conservative, he says at least 7,000 BC. So obviously it predates the conventional origin of the Old Dynasty, which is dated around about 3,000 BC, the Old Kingdom dynasties, I should say. But other people put it back further. John Anthony West likes to push the boat out, and even suggests that it might be as much as 36,000 years old. That's quite an extreme interpretation. Who knows? Nonetheless, there's a kind of consensus. Certainly, Hancock and Beauval consider it likely that this the Sphinx was excavated around the time of when Leo was the rising spring equinox sign, and that would certainly make a lot of sense, which would be in the region of 10,500 BC, which is about the time when there were some, well, there was it's now a fair amount of research being done on a cataclysmic event in North America, some kind of meteor impact, which is likely to have had a lot more to do with the mega fauna extinctions in North America than a few hunter-gatherers, and also could well have been a catalytic event to precipitate the ending, or at least kind of an interruption to the Ice Age, which kind of started finishing from there, and there were various ups and downs for the next 2,000 or 3,000 years, until it all sort of was, kind of melting by about 8,000 BC properly, and then we get the kind of emerging into the kind of modern, well, it's kind of exactly modern, but the precursor to the Sumerian civilizations, but even that's another 5,000 years before Sumeria. So, but also you have a building that I'm extremely interested in is the Osirion up the Nile in Upper Egypt, which is built at a much lower level than the surrounding Middle Kingdom temple complexes. In fact, if I recall correctly, the evidence is quite clear that some Middle Kingdom pharaoh was coming along and thought, oh, this is a good geomantic place, so we'll build a temple here, fine, starts building, and they're excavating along, and oops, well, there's something here rather older than what we're expecting, and there we are, kind of 20 feet below the desert sands is the Osirion, which is this megalithic structure with stones of huge volume and mass, the same as the Valley Temple, in really very, very, very similar, which is completely different from the local temple architecture. And of course, one of the most interesting things about this, which some people who are listening might know, is that etched into one or possibly more of these stones at the Ozarion is the Flower of Life, which is a series of overlapping circles within one larger circle. So you've got the hexagonal subdivisions of the radii and subdivisions into smaller circles within, which creates a petal-like pattern which spreads across. And this is a kind of a universal symbol which has been found in many different cultures. And the interesting thing about this particular version in the Ozarion is that it's not clear how it was etched. It certainly wasn't scored into the surface with stone tools or any kind of chisel. And apparently scientists have determined that it was burnt into it somehow with something, the nearest they can suggest is something like a laser, some kind of heat burning, very fine precision tool has scored the Flower of Life into the surface of this megalithic monument. And it's very interesting that, of course, anomalous features like this are completely ignored, but the fact is you have a monument which is of a different type to most Egyptian architecture, in that it's a vast megalithic structure, and it's got this scoring of the Flower of Life, which could only be done by some kind of advanced technical civilization, such as certainly is assumed that it's fairly well known that it presumed that the Middle Kingdom didn't have this technology. It could possibly have been built by the Old Kingdom, but again, we don't really know what. People kind of assume that Old Kingdom was just, sort of, ropes and pulleys and levers and stones, and just, Imhotep was rather clever and all that kind of stuff. But they're not supposed to have had, laser technology. Oh, and don't mention the granite drilled stone vases which have been found near the Great Pyramid, which no one has yet had the slightest idea how they could have bored out granite and stone jars with narrow necks with kind of the kind of bow saw, spinning bow and spinning drill kind of technology that they're assumed to have had with a stone bit on the end. It's very interesting that while, of course, we're thinking very much about the future, how we're going to change the world system away from one of slavery and debt, at the same time, it's worth thinking about how civilization has existed in different forms in ways in the past, which have come and gone but left their remains. And it's humbling, I think, to realise that we are not the apex of a continuous progress, but that civilizations have fallen in the past, mega civilizations which have created huge structures which have lasted 10 or 12,000 years, buried under the sands or whatever. And we have to re-evaluate our own civilization in the light of what has gone before. And obviously there's an immense amount of sort of legend and speculation around all this kind of stuff. But we have to remember these were people very much like us in terms of human build, and with brains like ours, and they thought in very different ways. And perhaps the time has come where we need to think in very different ways, get a larger view of the universe and of the world, and incorporating what Graham Hancock calls a lost episode from our past. He says we are a species with amnesia, and I think he's right. There is so much evidence now, not least these two examples I've given, that there is a lot more out there than is conventionally dreamed of. Horatio, in conventional philosophy. So I would urge people to look up these things, Göbekli Tepe, the Ozarion, and think about the implications of megalithic stone building cultures 10 or 12,000 years ago, which predate Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid and all that by, what would it be, 7,000 years. 7,000 years. 7,000 years is longer than our recorded history since the beginning of Mesopotamia. So there's a lot that can happen, there's a lot that can be lost. We're now, the precessional cycle is changing again, and hopefully we're moving into a new and higher level of vibration where the human race has hopefully learnt something from the last 5, 10, 12,000 years, and what we need to do now is go forward in a better social spirit, and that's really where the future solutions lie, and not all these technical fixes and transhumanism and all that stuff, which will only destroy the world and turn us into androids and robots. So remember who we are. We are a race with amnesia. We need to remember what that is all about, and see ourselves as greater than the narrow little species that conventional history would like us to be seen as, which is disempowering. We are an ancient species, and we have a proud history, even though most of it may have been lost in the depths of history. So anyway, I'll leave with you with these thoughts this evening, as we approach just a few days now from the end of the precessional cycle, which is marked by the Mayan long count on Friday. So I hope that will be interesting to some people, and say thank you for the evening, and in Lakesh. Good night, thank you. Current Gregorian system. But it's also the end of a precessional cycle, as the winter solstice sun is in direct alignment with the centre of the galaxy. Now this is actually something that's been going on for several years now, and it will continue for another 3 or 4 years, I understand. But so it takes place over about 18 or 25 years or something, because it's such a slow progression across the sky. It can be considered to be within conjunction 4. Well, we're going to have plenty of speculation about what's going to come in the next calendric cycle. But one thing that I'm interested in, and which is, I think, for me and a lot of other people, played a big part in the kind of growing awareness of a bigger picture of the world over the last 20 years or so. Interestingly, during that time when we've been transiting the winter solstice sun's been transiting the galactic core, is the growing awareness of the ancient lost civilizations, possibly, which has been given to us all by the investigative powers and determination of people such as John Anthony West, Robert Boban, of course, the great Graham Hancock, Robert Shark, all that crew, Andrew Collins, not to be ignored. He's done a bit of work on his own, very interesting, and lots of other people, and that 2-decade period or so. However, the Mayans, who were, the most advanced calendrical culture that has ever been known, for some reason chose this particular year to end their calendar, which is interesting. We could speculate about why that might be, but just wanted to kind of mostly just talk about how when you're coming to the end of one cycle, you kind of want to look back, a bit like when you come to the end of a year on New Year's Eve, you kind of look back and think, oh, what's happened this year and what might happen next year. Hello everybody, good evening, I'm Cosmic Claire, and welcome to another one of my nightly, and I hope there will be video blogs. Well, now the big event we're all building up to at the moment, well, if you know about it, is the end of the Mayan long count on Friday, which is the end of a 5,125 year calendric cycle based on the complex mathematical systems of the Maya, which are more accurate than the